hours. You're listening to Brento's Budget Filmmaker Podcast. The mission of this podcast is to share with you my annual filmmaking journey for the sole effort I do each year to prepare for my entry into several regional and local film festivals. I'm an individual who has worked with a larger group, and I enjoy working with a larger group, but in this case I want to do something that I basically fund entirely myself and get to essentially call the shots on. It's really fun collaborating with others, but once in a while it's also a nice artistic exercise to be able to just really write, produce, and direct your own thing. And that, in essence, is what I'm going to be doing here in the next weekend coming up. So I'm sharing with you the 7 days of pre-production and the 2 days of actual production, starting with today, which is day -7. I want to begin by talking about script size and budget. I say budget filmmaker. What I really mean is no budget filmmaking. If you are funding a project out of pocket, if it's anything less than a feature film, you probably should try to find actors, cast, and crew that, like you, are passionate about getting a project into film festivals and are willing to work for free. That said, you can't expect everybody to come out and pay for their own food and their gas and whatnot. So all these things have to be considered when you come down to the actual nuts and bolts of exactly how much money you need to spend. Now, I will say that my experience is that everything goes better on a full belly. So one thing you absolutely have to do is feed your cast and crew. Now, realistically speaking, you can do this pretty cheaply, but if you have multiple days of shooting, you don't want to go on a shoestring budget every single day, because that kind of gets old and it sort of gets you talked about among the actors and the crew. So I would recommend that you look at about $10 per person per meal for the period of time that they have to be there. So that's a wide range right there. You could have anything from store-bought stuff to home-cooked meals. Certainly home-cooked meals would be cheaper, but of course that involves someone to do the preparation and bring it out hot. I'd say at the very least you need to have at least one hot meal a day. In my case, I have a 2-day shoot planned with a casting crew of approximately 10. At times there will be more people on the set, but those people will show up for one particular scene and then they'll be cut loose. I think a general rule of thumb is when your first person arrives, the first meal should be roughly 5.5 hours later. And in addition to that meal, there should be snack food, chips, things that are really cheap to buy, a case of water, a case of pop or whatever. Have that stuff on hand, because if people are sitting there waiting to do their bit, the opportunity to have a refreshment really helps lift spirits and morale, and ultimately gets you a better performance out of all of your cast and crew. So that's a good thing. I mean, you definitely want to have that. So script size and budget, I would say in general, you're looking at a minute of film time for a page of script. So in my case, I'm looking at a 10-minute short maximum. In my past experience, I've been able to shoot a 10-minute short for approximately $300 to $500. In this case, I wanted to have more money on hand, and ultimately I did have more money set aside, but certain things have happened that were unexpected that actually ended up saving the production money. And so, good things as well as bad things can pop up. So I'm hopeful that I'll be able to get out for less than I had originally budgeted. I originally budgeted $2,000, and at present I'm thinking maybe I can get out a little bit cheaper than that, primarily because in the case of one of the actors who was coming from out of town, I had budgeted for hotel stay, and actually multiple. Our original location was going to be another town, and there were going to be probably 2 to 3 hotel rooms involved, and now that's not the case. We're actually shooting closer to home. Again, this is one of those things that can always work in your benefit if you can shoot at a central location, say no more than an hour and a half from anybody, where they could feasibly travel to and from your shoot. This will ultimately save you money. So this kind of flows into the next topic, what to pay for or what not to pay for. In my opinion, if you're making a short film and it's purely a labor of love, particularly a genre short film, meaning horror, or, well, I mean, I guess anything could be a genre, but when I say genre, I'm referring to like horror or sci-fi or fantastical type speculative fiction productions, you're going to have people that are way into it. There's going to be folks who'll be like, oh, wow, in the case of the film I'm working on, Take That, I had made another short film called Respawner, actually, that had the main character was a police officer that when she was killed turned into an unstoppable demon, basically. And just the cool factor of that particular character really got me a lot of messages and IMs, people saying, wow, what a cool character, I'd love to be in something like that. So in the case of one of our leads in the script that I'm about to shoot, Take That, she said to me, wow, when I saw that poster for Respawner, I was literally jealous that it wasn't me. And I went, and this girl had a nice reel, and I noticed that she could act okay, and had a really good look, very photogenic. And I thought, well, there's an opportunity for a future project. And I actually kind of wrote this role with her in mind, and of course she was thrilled to come on board for it. And actually it involved a bunch of makeup work and body casting of the sort that I had a feeling she would be down for, that maybe some other people would not be, because it's a real hassle to have to get your live cast made and such. So yeah, that worked out great. So the point I'm driving at here is you can pay actors anything that you can afford. And it's not that I don't think actors are worth it. Certainly there are top-notch actors out there that you cannot work with without paying them a per-day rate. That said, certain folks in the same circle as me have made some preposterous statements about what you should pay an actor. My opinion is, for a short film, are you getting paid to do this short film? Are you getting paid for your time and effort? Well, then, if you're not, you're probably on a level where your peers aren't getting paid either. So it's about being hungry, and there are a lot of actors out there who are hungry. They get paid for bigger projects, but for short films, many of them will be willing to work for free, or for, at the very least, compensation for gas or whatnot, and all that is reasonable. But I would say what to pay for is what you absolutely have to pay for. What not to pay for is anything at all that you can get away with not paying for. For example, if you need a location, it's real easy to pay a location fee. Many places will ask for it. Explain to them that your budget just doesn't allow for it, and you'd love to include them and give them credit, in the film and perhaps on IMDb. And it'll be great exposure for their establishment, etc., etc. Many places will be willing to let you shoot there for free. So again, just pay for what you absolutely have to pay for. Don't pay for anything that you can get away with not paying for. And now, this is just definitely a key to guerrilla filmmaking or budget filmmaking, no budget filmmaking. Something to keep in mind. Moving right along, my next topic is working with a larger group versus doing it yourself. There's actually a lot to say on this subject, many pros and cons on each side, but I will boil it down to this. Working with a larger group, you can do bigger projects. Many hands make light work, so you can divide not only the expenses, but the actual time involved in pre-production and production among multiple partners. If you can find people that are on the same page as you, this is fantastic. It will build you as an artist and just really, really expand your reach. Your projects will be much more extensible. It'll be great. Great exposure, great experience. With that comes a few drawbacks. Usually, you'll start out and everything will be equitable, and you'll find three guys or girls or people or whatever putting in equal amounts of effort and money, in which case it's all groovy. Eventually, someone will get distracted or life will take them away, and you'll find a partnership where it's not as equitable. Perhaps one person's spending more money, or another person is basically doing all the legwork. And then you start to have hurt feelings after a period of time. So perhaps, working with a larger group is great for a small time, and then some projects you might want to do yourself. Obviously, the big advantage to doing it yourself is that you get to call the shots. At the end of the day, the project's success or failure is on, it's always going to be ensemble because you have a cast and a crew. But ultimately, you can, if calling the shots is important to you for any reason, then you should explore the idea of doing your own short film or even feature film if you feel you can pull it off. But Lordy, that is a really huge task. I would recommend having 3 to 5 short films completed before you even consider trying to shoot a feature film. That's my opinion. In my experience working with a larger group, I've really enjoyed it. I've had a great time with it. But many times, what I imagined in my head had to be compromised because it was involving 2 other equal partners, and ultimately friction will arise if you get too persistent in your views, and things will go in a different direction than you'd imagine. I mean, that's not a terrible thing. I mean, works of fiction are almost never exactly what you imagine in your head, but ultimately for me, just artistically, I felt the need and desire to do a short film myself, and this will actually be my really essentially 3rd short film, and I'm using some of the common players from the larger group to help me with it, but I'm really excited about the idea of working with a script that I wrote completely independently and got my own feedback from outside the group on, and it's a very exciting prospect for me, so perhaps it will be for you too. Script is king. Basically, you have to have your script. The great thing about writing your own script is that you can take all the time you need. I would say just in general, always follow a 3-act structure. There's plenty of books on that. Just go to Google and search for 3-act structure or script writing guides or Sid Fields, and you're going to find some fantastic resources that lay this out for you in a formula even a monkey could follow. So do a good job writing your script. When you feel like you have something you want to share, I would recommend sharing it with multiple people, but you also want to keep your ideas close to your chest. Don't give away, everything to everyone, because in smaller communities like we have around the Charlotte area with filmmaking, many folks will take your idea and try to duplicate it or put their own stamp on it. I wouldn't go as far as saying plagiarism, but as far as copying concepts, a lot of that goes on. So you want to keep that close to the vest. Get your feedback. Try to take something from every bit of feedback. You're probably going to get some glowing praise. That's less useful than the critical feedback, but if you tend to get really solid feedback that is generally positive from multiple people, then of course that means you're onto something. If you get something that's overly critical, particularly if it's someone who hasn't written any scripts or made any movies that you think are real hits, you got to take it with a grain of salt. I mean, I'm sure ego comes into it when writing. Of course, never fall in love with your first draft, but you have to be careful because sometimes people that are giving you feedback, they have ego involved if they're screenwriters and directors, and this isn't as good as my script or whatever. So you just have to kind of take it on the whole and just sort of average it out and see what you can take from each bit of feedback. When you get where you're happy with the script, then it's time to look at it and make sure you get it as tight and small as you can and say, is this something I can afford to do? How long will it take? Who will I need? What help will I need? And then just kind of go from there. Which leads me into the next talking subject, casting. Okay, so casting, you never, ever want to just give somebody a role. You absolutely always want to, at the very least, read someone for it. In my case, I find that if I'm doing a project where I expect folks to work for free, people that I have a relationship with from past projects or have seen them act and kind of know their reputation and know their capabilities, I think it's okay writing for someone. It's kind of bit me in the past, to be honest with you, but in the case of this film, I sort of learned from that and took those negative experiences and said, hey, even if I saw this person play a great character in this other film, they're going to have to read for this role, even if they're the only one I'm considering. And so I recommend at least that. If you write something for your friends, your buddies, folks work for free, just make sure that you have a reading where they're able to deliver something like what you want to get. And as long as that's the case, you'll be golden. You'll never have any big surprises when it comes time to shoot, and folks just cannot deal with your dialogue. It's really easy to get excited about really cool sounding dialogue, and then you might find that some folks have trouble actually giving it back to you the right way. So it's always good to have a reading. As far as casting publicly, then you're into kind of a bigger crapshoot. On the other hand, you might get like amazing individuals that are willing to do your shoot for free, or bring an entire new aspect to your project, artistically or otherwise. So casting on the forums is not bad. If you are lucky enough to have a coffee shop or somewhere that'll let you do a public reading, hey, that's even better because you tend to get more folks coming out for those. That's about all I have to say about casting. In my case, I just think it gets to be a little bit easier process every time that you've done it. Okay, so dealing with changes in cast, locations, and setbacks would be my next talking point. This project had all of those. I basically wrote the lead for this for a friend of mine who I just felt like was a really good actor, particularly comedically speaking, but a lot of folks didn't really get him, and I wanted to see him in a lead role, and I kind of planned the story around that character. Several key plot points really relate to casting someone that looks like him, and unfortunately, due to some personal family issues, he's had to withdraw from the project on like 2 weeks' notice. To say that this was a setback and a complete drag for me would be an understatement, but on the other hand, I had noticed a hesitance to commit to reading with me on the phone or just be a little more hands-on and involved in the project. And I think that was sort of a little red light for me, and I started to wonder if perhaps his commitment, had waned. And when you cast projects far out in the, you're planning something for far in the future, 6 months prep time or whatever. Things like this can come up and often do. So that's just one example that I had to deal with. Fortunately, one of the folks that had read for another role, I instantly recognized the similarities in their type and thought, wow, this person could actually probably play the lead. And as it turned out, that person did not get the other role, and I went back to him and said, hey, what about the lead role? And of course, that was probably flattering as all hell, and they were happy to take it. So problem solved. Disaster averted. So locations. We already had, there's a bar room set in this location. We had a location locked down and agreed upon because I really wanted to shoot in a bar in off hours. When I called up to confirm, closer to the date, I'm going to be out of town that weekend. You'll have to do it during business hours. This was a bit of a setback and a surprise. We looked at trying to make our own bar, but the expense of it was ridiculous, and we're just going to have to deal with the situation and hope it doesn't come down to having to ADR. The pluses of the location, the look of it, having a real bar, it's just too big to ignore versus a makeshift bar. So we're going to go forward with shooting during business hours and just hope that we can kind of manage the situation. Only time will tell if that works out well for us, but I will certainly let you know. So that's just one of the circumstances, and as it turned out, the lead was really involved with a lot of our locations as well, and when he went, so did they. But we were able to make other arrangements, again, because we were planning so far in advance, and this ultimately did not become so disastrous for us. Well, we're running on at about 7 minutes now, so I don't want to carry on for too long. Join us for the next podcast on day -6, when we'll be talking about special effects and hands-on, experts versus doing it yourself, and other topics. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on Brento's Budget Filmmaker Podcast.